I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Noel Massie.
Development is the most important role of the leader, and that you have to model what you want your people to become, right? So those things have to be congruent. They can't be different. You have to model that behavior, and it needs to be natural, right? And once you do it regularly, it becomes natural.
Noel Massie is the former Vice President of U.S. Operations at UPS and author of the new book, Congrats, You've Been Promoted. Noel began his career at UPS as a part-time college student and rose to lead over 200,000 employees and 12,000 supervisors across the U.S. Known for his values-based leadership, he's spent his career developing people and leading with purpose. Now retired, Noel continues that work by mentoring young leaders and serving on the boards of major organizations, including the Annenberg Foundation and the Los Angeles Urban League. My interview with Noel Massie is coming right up. But first, quick question. How confident are you that your content actually connects in every market? If you're guessing, it might be time to check out Phrase. Phrase is the industry-leading AI localization platform that helps you deliver content in multiple languages without losing your tone, your message, or your mind. It automates the manual work, slashes review time, and gives you real data on what's working where. Brands like Uber and Zendesk trust Phrase to scale their content across the globe and get it right every time. If you're serious about reaching more people and driving better results internationally, head over to phrase.com/MPN and take a look. That's phrase.com/MPN.
Are you tired of juggling multiple software tools to manage your agency? Say hello to Deltek Workbook, the ultimate solution for marketing and communication agencies. With Workbook, you can streamline your projects, resources, and finances all in one place. Imagine real-time dashboards and reports giving you full visibility into your projects, people, and financials. Plan your team's capacity weeks in advance to avoid bottlenecks while staying on budget to maximize project margins. Plus, Workbook works perfectly for both agencies and in-house marketing teams looking to boost efficiency and profitability. And here's the best part. At PCI, we're a certified Deltek partner and reseller offering expert implementation, integrations, and ongoing support to ensure your success. Want to see how Deltek Workbook can transform your operations? For a free consultation, visit pci.us/podcast today. That's pci.us/podcast.
Noel Massie, welcome to On Brand.
Hey, Nick, I'm happy to be on your show today. I look forward to our conversation.
You know, I alluded to this a bit in the bio, but I love when we get to hear a little bit about people's origin stories. And that sounds like it's almost the plot of a movie of someone that starts as a part-time college student and then rose to the ranks in leadership. Take us back to that first job. What did the beginning of what turned out to be a very big path look like?
You know, I went to San Jose State University, and I was a electrical engineering major at the time. And so the first job I had when I lived prior to going to college was at McDonald's. And so when I went to college, I continued to work at McDonald's, you know, in the area near the university to pay for my education, bottom line. And in my freshman year in college, IBM had a recruiter on campus looking for college students, basically to do at the time, which would have been intern type work. I was a lab tech, right? So I worked at IBM for a year as a lab tech with a group of engineers. And the project they were working on, and this will date me a lot actually, was something that didn't exist in the late 70s, which was the laser printer. So they delivered the first laser printer to the market. That thing was like 60 feet long, and I'd run tests for the engineers, blah, blah, blah. But in any event, that job took more from me in terms of time and hours than I could really afford at the time. So I left that position after a year, and I started working for UPS part-time. And the reason I went to UPS part-time was because it fit my college schedule. I could work part-time. I was really making quite a salary at that time. And in the late 70s. And so it allowed me to go to school, pay for my education, work 5 hours a night. It was great. But when I got to the point where I was about to graduate from college, I had accepted a job at Hewlett Packard to be an engineer in my final year of college prior to graduating. But I told my manager at the time that I was going to be leaving, and I was in a part-time supervisory capacity, and that was in 1980. And he said, "Hey, wait a minute. We really love what you're doing as a part-time supervisor." I had like 7 or 8 people under me. And he offered me to stay in the organization and become a partner in the company. So I was promoted in 1980. And then I went on to become a manager about 4 years later. And I ended up with about 400 or 500 people at that point. I was 26. And then when I had that position for like 4 years, and then about 4 years later, I became a mid-level manager, division manager. So I had a couple thousand people then and managers reporting to me. And from there, I went to Philadelphia in the mid-90s and became what would be the COO or operations manager in Eastern Pennsylvania, Southern New Jersey. And in 97, I was promoted to a president's position in Chicago. And I went on to run 5 different business units as a president. And then in my final role, which is the one you just talked about, I was Vice President of U.S. delivery operations. So all the daily delivery drivers, we have about 100,000 of them. And then the management teams around them were led by 17 presidents in the U.S. And I was really the facilitator between the corporate headquarters and those 17 presidents on a day-to-day basis with their delivery operations under me. And so when I retired, that created 9 promotions. So think about that. I retired. It created 9 promotions because I left, someone replaced me, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that was a real challenge in my last couple of years running the U.S. was the turnover of Gen X and baby boomers leaving. And we were promoting young people to beat the band. And the fact of the matter is that the derailment rate for someone being promoted into leadership is usually in the first couple of years. And so you don't promote someone with potential to lose them. And so the idea for the book came to me then. I had actually worked in some leadership development capacities for the organization. So a lot of the content of the book, Congrats, You've Been Promoted, comes from a time when I actually facilitated leadership curriculum. And I felt like it was important to leave that for young people, whether they work for UPS or a grocery store. It doesn't matter. One day, they're stocking shelves, and the next day the manager says, "Hey, we want to promote you to supervisor to lead the people stocking shelves," and it's like a sink or swim moment for them. There's no one there waiting to train them or teach them how to be a leader. And so that was the impetus. That's my background, and that was the impetus for the book.
Well, it really kind of sheds light on the idea that we talk a lot about career pathways and leading people into leadership positions, into management positions, almost thinking about it like as a map. But what you're really talking about are the tools that individuals need along the way. Was there one that came to mind that was a big light bulb that you saw? There's a particular skill. There's something that I see consistently challenging new managers.
Yeah, no doubt. First and foremost, it's about what it when I think about when my career started, okay, and that obviously is the backdrop, is things come at you fast, they come at you quick, and you haven't been developed or trained to do them. You just haven't. You're 26, you're 25, you're 27, whatever, and all of a sudden here you have someone working for you and they're 50, 60 years old. And you give them their work assignment or whatever it is the organization has hired you to do. And they say, "I'm not doing that." And it's in a moment where it's just you and them, or maybe you and them and 3 coworkers of theirs is watching. And that moment is very determinate. It's very determinate about how the team will respect you going forward. And so I saw a lot of those moments, right? So I understood that place. I get where that is. And when you look at leadership development content, and the fact of the matter is most of it is aimed at people that want to be entrepreneurs, CEOs, how to get wealthy, blah, blah, blah. But none of it says, here's what you do when someone comes at you hot, their check is wrong, They have an issue. They feel like they've been treated unfairly in that moment, in that split second. How do you handle it? So in my book, it's very tactical. I teach skill sets. The 4x5 method is an example of that. It's a method. It's a structure. It gives that person what to do in the blink of an eye in that moment. And I know it works because I taught it for decades to other leaders that were on the front lines in the trenches. So I know it works. And then there's another concept called the BEST principle in the book. So the book is two parts. Part one is value-based, and that's the most important thing. I want to emphasize that. And once you understand the importance of intentional leadership value methodology, because the word intentional is real important. Some things can't be left to chance. Matter of fact, I'll tell you as a leader, most things can't be. And so I want the new leader to understand that day one you get that position, you need to intentionally drive certain value-based agreements or terms and conditions between you and the team. Because that's the foundation of the book, the terms and conditions of value-based leadership. And I use what, you think about terms and conditions. When you buy an airline ticket, you click a box, terms and conditions. You park your car in a parking lot, terms and conditions. They go, hey, if your car gets broken into, don't call us. That's the terms and conditions. You get a warranty, terms and but people have terms and conditions. Nick, you have them. If I were to say to you, Nick, I want you to write down 5 non-negotiables that must exist between you and who you work with or for. You're going to write down some really basic things like they need to be honest with me. They need to show me respect. They need to listen when I have something to say. They're going to be really basic. But the problem in most organizations with the CEOs all the way down to the front line is they don't intentionally frame that for the people. So if you're a leader, day one, you meet your team, it's 9 or 10 people. You have to introduce yourself, right? You do it as a group first. But in the book, I talk about doing it individually, right? Don't think that meeting Nick with 10 other people gets it done. No, you need to plan in your first couple of weeks. Hey, Nick, when do you have some time so we can sit down and have coffee? And that's when you get to really know him. And you say, okay, here are the terms and conditions I'm going to operate under, Nick. That you never have to question if I'm going to have integrity, and I'm going to expect the group to have integrity, because that's really a foundational leadership principle, integrity. And the other thing, you get to talk to Nick, and it might not be as direct as you hear me saying, but in the way it needs to be done, ethics are really important to me. If it's not ethical, we're not doing it. And if you ever believe, Nick, that we got some unethical stuff happening, I want to know. Let me know. If you feel like fairness is a problem, I want to know. Let me know. So you're establishing a baseline with Nick, right? Immediately. Not letting it go for 3 months and something bad happens and, Nick's questioning. And the important part of what I'm saying is I also want leaders, the business owner who's hiring leaders, to understand that trust is not just the absence, that trust isn't just the emergence of distrust. I mean, when you're building trust, the way that you do that with people is they need to understand you are true to your word, and you have to say it. And Nick, I'll always keep my word if I ever make a commitment to you. That's how you start developing that value system. And then in part 2, of course, I teach the person how to execute on it with the principles you heard me talk about earlier.
On Brand will be right back after this.
Growing your e-commerce business comes with plenty of hurdles, but shipping shouldn't be one of them. Well, here's some good news. Powerful e-commerce shipping software called ShipExcel from Pitney Bowes. With ShipExcel, you can generate discounted shipping labels for both online and offline orders. That saves time and money, with everything right at your fingertips. Start your free trial of ShipExcel from Pitney Bowes today.
Now, back to the show. So, you mentioned earlier that, if we were to ask about values, and that's an idea that a lot of us nod along to, and like you said, a lot of us can pretty quickly come up with some basic ones. How do you get to, beyond scratching the surface, what values are most important for you to communicate in your work as a leader?
As I mentioned a minute ago, that the foundation of the value-based leadership principles that I worked under for 40 years, and I know they work, is establishing how we're going to frame the day-to-day life, right? So if you look at any survey you want around ethics, you're going to find that over 30 to 40% of people in today's 2025 workplace believes at some point they were asked to do something unethical. That's a big number. So that's like right now, 40% say, yep, things have come up in my job where being unethical was okay. Well, when you're a leader, you have to say there's some non-negotiables. And I talked about them. And integrity is really important. When people know you have integrity, that value alone will get them on your side. That value is the most critical of all the value equation pieces. And then ethics. And I tell stories in the book, and I give examples of situations. So it's real. They're real life. These things happened. Here were the outcomes. I saw them up close, blah, blah, blah. And so that's how you get people over the hump of who you are as a person, as a leader, who you are. And I talked about how I tell stories in the book regarding these things to make them real, and people can identify with that. I have a number of young mentees that candidly, as I was writing the book, which took 3 years, that I could run things by them. They would talk to me about their day-to-day lives. And so a lot of the situations are real. And to help the person navigate to getting through those. And you heard me mention, I have a couple of phrases, and I think intentional leadership, a leader needs to have things that people associate with you. For instance, one of mine, if you to say, hey, Noel Massie? Yep, worked with him, he's a president. And tell me one of the things that you used to hear him say. If there's no question, if there's any question, there's no question. They would say that. That was like one of the things that would roll off my mouth all the time. If there's any question, no way. We're not doing it. Okay. If there's any doubt, there's no doubt. Okay. We're not going down that road. So you start to build a foundation of language. Your daily language needs to support your daily value intentions. That makes sense, right? And one technique that I also know you would hear if you talk to someone who knew me, and you can see that on the book and the testimonials from some pretty big players, some CEOs who actually did advocacy on the back of the book, that kind of stuff, is, one of the things that you would hear from people who also are close to me would be how intentional leadership is something they always would hear me say. That, listen, what do you intend to accomplish? Think about the word intentional. If I said, hey, what's your intention today? You'd say, well, I want to do this. I got these priorities. I got these. Okay, so with a leadership group, who are you developing? How are you developing the team? Because you're the coach. Because leadership is coaching. Okay, and at its very basic nature, the leadership is the ability to influence the behavior of a group or an individual without coercion. Okay, that's really important. Because once you go down the coercion road, you've left the room of leadership. Okay, so that's hopefully something that answers what you just asked.
So you mentioned stories as a tool that you use in the book and in leadership. I teach a class in our MBA program here at the University of Iowa that's called Leadership Communication and Story. And I wonder if you had an example of a story that you find yourself or would find yourself when you were actively in leadership roles, getting out and using strategically with your team.
Yes. In the book, I tell a story about a friend, actually, who worked for a large organization that sold construction equipment. So when you see those cranes sitting over skyscrapers, he was actually a salesperson for those items, and they're very expensive, right? But in any event, and in the book I talk about, his name was Russell. I use a different name. That's the name I use in the book, Russell. But in any event, Russell was being asked by his manager to report sales of that crane when he had a handshake from the company, not a check, okay, not an invoice that was acknowledged paid, and it was a change in procedure. So Russell was really uncomfortable with that. When I was chairman of the board of the LA Chamber of Commerce, because I was chairman of the board of the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce in the mid 2000s, mid 20 teens, anyway, 2014, 2015. He sat on that board and he said, "Hey, no, do you have a moment?" Because one of the things he heard me talk about all the time was value-based leadership, integrity, ethics, blah, blah, blah. So he heard me talk about that stuff. He said, "Can we have coffee?" So we had coffee. And he told me the story about what his manager's doing. And I said, "Russell, did anyone hear him say that to you?" And he was like, "Well, no." I said, "There's a reason for that, Russell." Okay. Because when there's a trial, you're the one that reported something sold. It wasn't, not him. Okay. And he can just deny that he asked you to do it. Okay. Because he's probably getting pressure to hit his numbers. I said, so here's what you need to do to manage through that circumstance. You go get with him and you say, "Okay, listen, if there's a procedure change, I want to see it. Show it to me and then talk to your peers. Have they received the same request? And let your manager know you're going to do that, right? You're going to, that this is a change. You want to make sure you're keeping the line straight. There's nothing's fuzzy here, etc." I said, so sit down with him and let him know that you are uncomfortable with this request unless you see documentation. He did that. And the manager removed the request, right? He was like, "Hey, just leave it the way it was. Don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah." So he calls me the day after that meeting, goes, "Hey, thank you very much." He goes, "I was really nervous about that." I say, "Hey, Russell, when you are uncomfortable in your life with something, think about when you've gotten uncomfortable. That's what discomfort is telling. It's uncomfortable. And when things are uncomfortable, what do you normally do in your regular life?" He goes, "Well, I look for comfort. I try, if I'm wearing an uncomfortable shirt, I take it off." Right. I said, so if it's uncomfortable, don't do it. Get other people in the boat. Don't go it alone. Don't feel uncomfortable. Announce the issue, because I saw that many times in my 40 years with people. And that's the answer to the test, is when you're uncomfortable and you keep going, okay, that's on you 100%. Okay. But when you're uncomfortable, announce it, say it. "I'm not comfortable with that. I need more evidence that this is what we're doing, blah, blah, blah." Because, when people become unethical, here's what they always want, Nick, is company. They always want company. When they do things they shouldn't be doing, they want to have other people do that with them, right? So they're going to look for partners.
So misery loves company, and so too does unethical behavior.
No doubt.
So values, ethics, integrity, these are big topics. And you've led some big teams the size of small cities. How does this work translate to that extreme scale in the work of leading a big organization?
The benefit of leadership. I just wrote a op-ed, and in the op-ed, and it's an op-ed for CEOs, right? It's a CEO. It was a CEO op-ed, a magazine article, whatever, for CEOs. And in the opening of the op-ed, I opened it with, the singer Sting wrote a song called "Every Breath You Take," right? And it says, "Every move you make, I'll be watching you." Okay, so when you're the leader, that's the narrative, period, right? There was an example of that recently that went viral, right, at a Coldplay concert, okay? There's no casual moments in leadership. That's the number one thing, period, right? When the job was open and they said, "Hey, would you like to be the CEO or whatever you were going to be?" You raised your hand and went, "Pick me for that. I want to do that." Okay, well, that came with stuff. And the main thing it came with is understanding that you are the leader. There are no casual moments in leadership. None. Zero. You want a casual moment, go in a room by yourself or go somewhere alone or with your partner, your spouse, where no one else is going to see you that you don't want seeing you. Okay, then you get to be casual. But when you're in the public eye, I don't care if you're at a park. If your employees see you in a park and you're with your family, you know who you are in that park? You're the CEO in the park with your family. Okay, there are no casual moments in leadership, like zero, right? And I talk about that for a point. That's a good thing. Leaders want to be followed. They want their people to look up to them. They can't say that's what they want, but then have some kind of deniability around that. So conscious leadership, conscious behavior is important. And it's something I learned over a 40-year career, right? Probably didn't know it in the first 5 or 6, but I certainly learned it as I moved through the leadership ladder. And so that's a really critical aspect of leadership is when you have a lot of people, they want to hear what you have to say. And so when you say stuff, it needs to be done with intention. What are the things around values? Because you can't control what they do once they leave, right? If they're installing cable in homes, they go out to someone's house, you're not with them. You have them for a moment daily, usually in some way, the mid-manager, especially the frontline supervisor, right? They're in front of you. So if they always hear you saying, listen, there's any doubt, there's no doubt, give me a call. There's any question, there's no question, give me a call. If it looks wrong, it ain't right, give me a call. When they hear that daily, because that's just who you become, understand it translates. You think about, and I'll land the plane here. Think about NFL football coaches, because right, the season's starting, right? Okay, do they all coach the same? Well, absolutely not. Did Bill Belichick coach the same way that Bill Walsh coached? Absolutely not. Does Mike Tomlin coach the same way as Nick Sirianni? Absolutely not. Right? So you're going to have different styles of coaching, but 100% of the time, you're responsible for that team, their behavior, how they do things. So development is the most important role of the leader, and that you have to model what you want your people to become, right? So those things have to be congruent. They can't be different. You have to model that behavior, and it needs to be natural, right? And once you do it regularly, it becomes natural. Once you are a value-based leader and you understand that everything's going to spin off that, right? How we put the wheel on the car if we're a tire changing company spins off what the values are. It just does. Those become actions, right? So it has to become daily, and that's where most leaders miss the boat. I would meet with 150 small business owners annually as a president at UPS. And half the time, the conversation would navigate towards, so no, how does UPS blah, 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 development, people, et cetera. And I would go through it with the business owner, and I would say, do this for me, business owner. Write down the 5 most important things you believe your people need to support for you to be successful. And they'd write them down, right? And almost never be value-based. It'd be like profits and marketing and I go, okay, so then answer this question for me. And I would ask this. Okay, you have children? Yep. 90% of the time. Yep. Right. At that point in their lives. Okay. What do you want your children to be? How much work do you do on the values of your kids? And they would say, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. Right. I put them in the best schools and, I want them to be great people and blah, blah. I said, so how are you doing that with your company? How are you shaping so I'm going to go talk to your people, and I would go do that and say, what's the most important thing to that person that's paying your check? Write down 5 things. And they would never be the same. They would never be the same. But the owner of the business would have a massive aha after that. And it wouldn't be small. It would be ginormous. And they'd be like, okay, I understand. And they would change their approach. And this is not fluff. This is not about, happy talk. It's just not. Actually, it brings more accountability to the frame, right? And so you need to have congruence and alignment with the people you are leading, supporting. There needs to be congruence. And so if I walk up to one of my employees, a delivery driver, and he says, hey, no, blah, blah, blah. We got this happening at this thing, and I have a question to ask you. And I'd say, okay, well, Bill, if there's any question? He'd go, yeah, right. There's no question. There's your answer. Okay. So get other people involved. And so you have to develop that. That's what, coaches do, right? They develop the skill set of the player, right? And the leader is charged with developing the skill set of the player, not just being a human memo and saying, hey, do this today, do this today, do this today. Hey, we can replace you with AI if it's just about giving orders.
Well, between the lessons of from Sting and Coldplay to being a human memo, I have smiled a lot during our conversation, and it's now my turn to get to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Well, I talked about one that always makes me smile, McDonald's, because that's where I started my leadership journey, right? I was a part-time kid working in McDonald's, and I was really lucky. I worked for a guy who was a business owner, had five stores, franchisee, and he was a really supportive and great person. So every time I drive by one, I think about him, and this is a long time ago, obviously. But the reason, and one of the important reasons is no one's perfect. They certainly aren't. But when they misstep, they acknowledge it. They're honest about that misstep. And I've always respected how they have handled their business that way. So that one has always made me smile.
And another good reminder about the scale too, because correcting that misstep can be challenging, and they often do that too, and at scale.
Yeah.
Noel, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
So the traditional ways work. I'm on LinkedIn, and my email address to get into LinkedIn is on my website. Okay, so I have a website, noelmassie.com, takes you to my website, right? And there's a contact me form on there. And when people fill that out, my assistant, Kayla Bozeman, KaylaBozman, Bozeman @gmail.com. She will respond to any and all individuals that want to have a conversation. We have a couple of things we offer, buy a book, we do seminars, those kind of things, executive coaching. So that's how you can reach me. And you can also see the book on Amazon. It's in Barnes & Noble. The publisher is Simon & Schuster. Mission Driven Press handles that. They're an arm of Simon & Schuster. But so far, the reviews have been really good. It took me 3.5 years to write it. It's kind of surreal, to be honest with you, to actually see that it's doing really well, and it's gotten some great reviews. And so we're happy, that way. But that's how they can contact me, is noelmassie.com. Just go there, or on LinkedIn. I'll respond on LinkedIn just as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Noel Massie, thanks for being on brand with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a great discussion. I appreciate it, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennica Watkins-Porter hosts the Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennica, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennicawatkinsporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.